I stood behind the velvet curtain of the new Willow Creek Community Center, my palms warm against the edge of the plaque that was still covered with a maroon cloth. The mayor was already on stage thanking the anonymous donor who had funded the entire construction. Cameras flashed. My cousins sat in the front row, crossed legs and crossed arms, whispering to each other about how real generosity comes from real money. Elise, in her glittering gold dress, smirked as she fixed her diamond earrings. Her brother Nolan leaned over and said loudly enough for me to hear, "Whoever donated this must be some rich guy trying to buy good PR, definitely not someone from our side of the family." I almost laughed. They had no idea. No idea that the papers in my bag, signed, notarized, stamped, held my name on every page. No idea that in less than 2 minutes, the mayor would call me forward. No idea that the cloth would drop and there it would be, in carved brass, donated by Mara Delaney. My name. The girl they called the charity case. The cousin they mocked for driving a beat-up Honda. The one they excluded from family photos for aesthetic reasons. The girl who used to sit at the fold-out kids' table at holidays. Even though I was 27. I could hear the mayor's voice picking up energy. And now, we would like to invite the donor, who has chosen today to reveal themselves, to join us. Shocked murmurs spread through the room. Elise's head snapped around. Nolan straightened in his seat. My heart slowed, steady and calm, like it had been waiting for this moment for years. I stepped out from behind the curtain, and suddenly, before my heel even hit the stage, the story of how I got here, how they tried to shrink me, how they taught me to stay small, how they said I owed them everything, unfolded in my mind like the quiet flicker of a film reel. Starting years back in that house where I first learned the taste of being less than. My earliest memories of our family gatherings always felt like walking into someone else's movie. My aunt's house, where all the Delaneys gathered for every winter holiday, was lavish in a way that felt intentional, like the chandelier was hung a little too low just so guests would notice it. I was 8 the first time Elise called me the accessory cousin. She draped her tiny fur shrug over her shoulders and told everyone she would allow me to be her +1 in group photos so I wouldn't feel left out. Later, I found out they cropped me out anyway. My mother tried her best to make things feel normal. But after my father died and she struggled to keep her bakery afloat, we became the relatives that everyone helped, though their help always tasted like humiliation with a side of sugar. My aunt would hand my mother envelopes of money at the end of each visit and say, loudly, "It's okay, Nora, we all know times are hard." Then she'd look at me with that condescending tilt of her head. "We'll take care of you until you get back on your feet." As if my mother hadn't been on her feet her entire life. As if we were some project they took pride in. By the time I was 16, I learned that the Delaney family's generosity came with strings, woven tightly, wrapped around your neck, disguised as silk. When Elise got her first car, she made sure I rode with her the first week just so she could be seen, helping the less fortunate. She'd pick me up while honking, roll down her window, and shout, "Mara, your chauffeur is here." Kids at school laughed. I pretended it didn't bother me. I learned early that the best defense was an unreadable face. When I finally got into community college, working nights at the bakery to pay for classes, my cousins threw a dinner celebrating my acceptance. I walked into the dining room to find a giant banner that read, "Congrats Mara, you made it out." Out of what? They never said. But the smirks around the table were enough. By then, I was used to it. Used to their brand of encouragement, where every compliment was a veiled reminder of where I came from. But there was one moment, one small, quiet injustice, that set everything into motion. It was the night of my mother's stroke. She survived, thankfully, but the hospital bills were monstrous. Elise and Nolan suggested a family fundraiser to help poor Aunt Nora. They called it a charity drive and printed flyers with my mother's picture, without our permission, plastering the words, "Support local family in need." My mother cried when she saw them. Not from gratitude. From shame. She spent her entire life refusing pity, and there she was, turned into a spectacle. I tore every flyer down. That night, while sitting beside my mother's bed, I promised myself something. Quietly, calmly, like a vow spoken to the walls that had held our whole life, I will never let them define us again. Not as charity cases. Not as burdens. Not as less than it took time. Years. But something inside me shifted. I started saving obsessively. I took jobs others turned down, report transcription at midnight, grant writing gigs, freelance data entry that paid cents but added up. I didn't care what people thought. Every dollar meant freedom. Then one day, while working part-time at the local planning office, I stumbled onto something that made my heart stop, a proposal for a community center on Willow Creek's south end, a neighborhood that had been overlooked for decades. The project was stalled, lacking one major donation. I read through the projected costs, the layout, the architect's notes about after-school programs, family counseling rooms, job training spaces. It was everything my mother would have wanted our community to have access to, and something inside me said, this is it. I spent months researching, learning how endowment structures worked, studying funding logistics, talking to advisors online who didn't know my last name. I started my own consulting microbusiness, slowly gaining clients. I saved every cent. And then, after 5 quiet years of grinding work, I did it. I signed the largest check of my life, transferring every dollar I had built. I signed the donation contract as the anonymous donor, but as I walked into the mayor's office that morning to finalize the unveiling event, he looked at me and said, "You know? You could reveal yourself. If you choose." And something clicked. I remembered every smirk, every joke, every dismissal, every envelope handed to my mother like we were lucky to receive scraps. I chose, now. Standing on this stage, the room buzzing with confusion, Elise whispering furiously to Nolan, and the mayor looking toward me in expectation. I took a breath and stepped forward. The moment stretched like silk pulled tight. I could feel my voice rising from somewhere steady, somewhere earned, and as I reached for the plaque cloth, I felt the first ripple of a truth that would change everything. I didn't lift the cloth right away. I let the silence build, let the weight of the moment settle into the room like dust catching the stage lights. Elise's face was pinched with irritation, her brows drawn together in a way that looked almost painful. Nolan shifted uncomfortably, like he could sense something was wrong but couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't at the center of it. My aunt, dressed in her usual peacock blue silk, sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. She looked bored, almost annoyed, as though the event was dragging on longer than her patience allowed. For a second, I just studied them, this family who had always measured people by money, by shine, by appearances. This family who had proudly handed out charity like party favors. This family who had never once imagined I could stand on a stage for any reason other than to receive help. And then I spoke, not loudly, not sharply, but with the same calmness I had cultivated over years of swallowing words and building them into something stronger inside myself. "Hi. I'm Mara Delaney," I said into the microphone. "And I'm the donor." A collective gasp rose from the audience like a wave hitting the shoreline. Chairs shifted. Phones lifted. People whispered my name as if it were brand new. As if they'd never seen me standing quietly at the back of holiday dinners or handing out cookies at my mother's fundraisers or existing in the corners of rooms they dominated. Elise's mouth fell open. Nolan's jaw tensed. My aunt blinked once, slowly, like her brain was buffering. I didn't pull the cloth yet. I wanted them to feel the moment. To sit in it. To understand that all the assumptions they had ever made about me had just collapsed like a badly built tower. I could feel the mayor smiling behind me, sensing the dramatic reveal. But inside, I wasn't thinking about theatrics. I was thinking about the small, quiet injustices that stacked over the years like bricks. I was thinking about the night I found my mother crying over those flyers. I was thinking about the first time my cousins called me a burden. I was thinking about every time they offered help only to remind me I needed it. I lifted the cloth, the maroon fabric, slid off the plaque in one smooth motion, pooling at my feet like a fallen curtain. Light reflected off the polished brass, and there it was, impossible to misread, impossible to mistake, donated by Mara Delaney. My name was carved deep, the letters bold and sharp, like they had been waiting years to exist in the open. The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Shouts. But my eyes were fixed only on my family. Elise's face turned a shade of red that would have matched the maroon cloth if she ever allowed herself to wear anything so humble. Nolan's expression twisted into confusion, disbelief, then something else, panic. And my aunt. She didn't move. Her face didn't change. Her hands stayed perfectly folded. But her eyes, those cold, assessing eyes I had memorized as a child, flickered with something I had never seen before. Not respect. Not pride. Something closer to fear. Or maybe realization. The mayor shook my hand and gave a short speech about generosity and community and service. I smiled politely, nodded when expected, but inside my mind was drifting backwards, back to the years when I thought achieving something like this required a sponsor or a last name that meant something. Back to the moments I doubted if I could ever be more than the role they assigned me. Back to the day everything changed, quietly, almost accidentally, because of a file folder I wasn't supposed to see. It was during my second year of working part-time at the planning office. I had been sorting documents late at night. My shift always ended after everyone else had gone home, and I found a proposal packet mislabeled in the grant folder. Inside were handwritten notes from the previous applicant who had tried to pitch a community center years ago. The man, a retired teacher, had given up because he couldn't gather enough support. But what caught my eye wasn't the plans. It was a scribbled line on the back of the cover page: "This center will outlive us all if someone with enough heart decides it's worth it." Someone with enough heart, not someone with enough money. Not someone with influence. Not someone with status, and for the first time, I realized I didn't need to be wealthy. I just needed to decide it mattered. That line changed me. It shifted the ground beneath my feet in a way I didn't fully understand then. But the shift made me pay attention to opportunities one had previously ignored. It made me learn how to write funding proposals, not for the office, but for myself. It made me take on clients who needed help navigating small business grants, because the more I learned, the more I could build. It made me start saving with intention, not survival. And little by little, one $50 payment from a client, one $200 freelance project, one scholarship refund check at a time. I grew a savings account I didn't tell a soul about. Not even my mother knew how much I had put away. Every day, I lived quietly. Worked quietly. Studied quietly. Listened quietly. But beneath the quiet, I was building something that no one saw coming now. Standing under the stage lights with the plaque gleaming behind me. Those years felt like bricks forming the foundation beneath my feet. The applause faded into something softer, an echo that hummed in the background while my family stared at me like I had transformed into a stranger. The mayor ended the ceremony and stepped away. Cameras circled. People congratulated me. But my family stayed seated, frozen, exchanging whispers with tight jaws and narrowed eyes. I made my way toward them, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to see their faces up close. I wanted to hear their reactions. I wanted to feel the shift, the first crack in the pedestal they built for themselves. Elise rose first, placing a practiced smile on her lips, one she used for charity galas and society teas. "Mara," she said, her voice honeyed and thin. "Why didn't you tell us? We would've supported you." I almost laughed at the word choice. Supported me? As in taken credit? Diluted it? Turned it into another spectacle? "You never asked," I said simply. Nolan stepped forward, his tone edged with disbelief. "Where did you get that kind of money?" And there it was. The real question. The one that cracked through their polite facades. The one that revealed the truth. They believed generosity only existed if wealth existed first. And in their eyes, I had never been wealthy. I had never even been equal. "I worked for it," I said. Nolan scoffed. "Doing what? You don't, I mean, you've always just been." He didn't finish the sentence. Maybe he couldn't find a word that wasn't insulting. Maybe he realized mid-sentence that anything he said would expose what he really believed about me. My aunt finally stood. Her pearl necklace caught the light like small, bright teeth. "Mara," she said in the tone she used when she was disappointed, "a contribution of this size. It's not appropriate for someone your age. You should have consulted the family." Consulted the family. As if my money was theirs to manage. As if my decision required their approval. Something warm steadied in my chest, not rage, but clarity. "It wasn't your decision," I said softly. "It was mine." She exhaled sharply through her nose. A tiny sound that reminded me of all the years she looked down on my mother, but before she could respond, an older woman, a retired social worker, approached me in tears, thanking me for giving the neighborhood something it had never had before. And for a moment, everything else faded. The noise. The tension. The past, because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about rising. Quietly. On my own terms. And letting the truth speak for itself. But as I watched my aunt's expression harden, I knew this unveiling was only the beginning. There would be consequences, and I was finally ready for them. The days after the unveiling felt like walking through air that had suddenly become heavier, thicker, charged with a new kind of attention. Strangers recognized me at the grocery store. Parents stopped me in parking lots to thank me. The local paper ran a full-page article with a photo of the plaque, my name shining across the top in brass. But while the town lifted me up with gratitude, my family reacted like the center had been built from their own bones. It didn't take long for it to begin, the subtle calls, the sudden invitations, the faux-concerned check-ins that came from people who hadn't spoken to me in months. Elise texted first, "We should talk. Family matters. Brunch at the estate tomorrow?" If she'd sent that message any other week, it might have meant something different. But I read it clearly now. She wanted information. She wanted leverage. She wanted control back. I didn't reply. Nolan called next, late at night, his voice thick from what I guessed was expensive whiskey. "Mara, hey. Listen. You know how close we are? I mean, family's family, right?" The irony nearly made me laugh. Nolan, who once joked in front of everyone that I was basically adopted because I didn't fit the Delaney look, was now reminding me we shared blood. "I think we should meet," he continued. "Just us. I want to understand how you pulled it off." Understand was code for digest the blow to his ego. How you pulled it off was code for who helped you, because surely someone had to. I told him I was busy that week. He didn't hide his annoyance. But it wasn't until my aunt called that I felt something inside me tighten, not anger, but anticipation. "Mara," she said the moment I picked up. "We need to have a conversation about your future." My future. As if she managed it. As if she shaped it. "There are responsibilities that come with publicly handling that kind of money," she continued, "and we don't want you being taken advantage of. Financial decisions should be guided by someone experienced, not made impulsively." Her tone was sweet, practiced, coated in a veneer of maternal concern. But beneath it, I heard the truth. They wanted access. Influence. Control. I let her speak until she paused, expecting obedience. "Thank you for your concern," I said softly. "But my finances are private. And I'm not discussing them." A beat of silence stretched across the line before she responded in a voice that could cut glass. "We'll see." I didn't realize how serious she was until 3 days later. I returned home after a long day at the new center, helping coordinate volunteer signups, reviewing after-school program applications, walking through rooms that still smelled faintly of fresh paint, and I found a white envelope sitting on my porch. No return name. No stamp. Someone had placed it there by hand. Inside was a notice from the Delaney family office. They were requesting a full financial review regarding my recent philanthropic activity due to concerns about risk, reputation, and potential misrepresentation. They wanted access to my accounts. They wanted documentation. They wanted receipts. They wanted to pull apart my life. For a moment, my breath caught, not from fear, but from the recognition that they were doing exactly what they'd always done. Using worry as a mask. Using family reputation as a leash. Using formal language to disguise personal insecurity. I stood on my porch, the sunset painting my street in orange light, reading the notice again. And slowly, steadily, something inside me hardened, quietly, like ice forming along the edges of a winter pond. They still didn't understand. They still believed I was the girl at the kids' table. The girl they took pity on. The girl who accepted their envelopes with lowered eyes. They didn't understand that the unveiling wasn't my peak. It was my beginning. I folded the letter, placed it neatly back in the envelope, and set it on my kitchen counter. Then I poured myself tea and watched the steam rise in thin, gentle swirls. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I let my mind drift back to the moment that had started all of this, the moment that had revealed the truth of my family long before they realized I would ever rise. It was 7 years ago. At a Christmas gathering. I was 21, home from school, still trying to pretend I belonged in rooms that made me shrink. I had offered to help my aunt carry dishes from the dining room. Eager to avoid the conversation Elise and Nolan were having about real achievement and the kind of success that matters. While placing trays in the pantry, I overheard voices on the other side of the wall, my aunt and her sister, speaking in that hushed but sharp way people use when discussing something they feel completely entitled to judge. "She's sweet," my aunt said. "But she's going to struggle her whole life. The Delaney line is strong, but we can't fix everything. Some branches grow weak." Her sister hummed. Do you think she'll ever amount to anything? A pause. Honestly? No. But at least she's grateful. Grateful, that word sank into me like a stone thrown into deep water. I didn't cry then. I didn't confront them. I didn't even let the tray clatter when I set it down. I simply swallowed it, let it settle, and tucked it into a place so deep that I didn't know it would bloom into something years later, something steady. Something unbreakable. Now, standing in my kitchen with the envelope from their office, I felt the echo of that moment. And I made a decision. The next morning, I dressed in a cream blouse, soft slacks, and low heels, the kind of outfit my aunt used to call underwhelming. I walked into the Delaney estate, up the marble staircase, and into the room where they were holding their so-called financial meeting. Elise was there. In a fitted mauve blazer that looked like it had been tailored specifically to make her seem in charge. Nolan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, trying to look authoritative. My aunt sat at the head of the table, fingers laced. Expression serene in the way only people with money and control ever seem to master. They expected me to sit at the far end. I took the seat directly across from my aunt. The air shifted. Mara, she began. We've reviewed your recent announcement. And we're concerned. Elise nodded, adding, you should have told us. This kind of exposure affects the family. I pressed my hands together, calm. It doesn't, I said. My donation, my money, my decision, it has nothing to do with the family. Nolan's mouth tightened. That's not how this works. We're Delaney's. What you do reflects on all of us. You're right, I said softly, leaning forward just enough to see their faces shift. Which is exactly why I've always been careful not to let your behavior reflect on me. Silence dropped like a weight. My aunt's fingers stiffened around each other. We're trying to protect you, she said carefully. A young woman with significant funds is vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable, I replied. Just inconvenient. That landed. I felt it. She straightened, mask slipping. We need to review your finances. It's non-negotiable. No, I said. It's absolutely negotiable. In fact, it's denied. Elise scoffed. You can't just deny the family office. I can, I said. And I am. I don't answer to you. My aunt's eyes hardened into small points of glass. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to treat this as a breach of family protocol. I nodded slowly. I know. And I'll respond accordingly. She blinked. Which means? I held her gaze, the years of quiet humiliation finally settling into clarity. It means, I said, that from today forward, I will be separating myself from the Delaney family. Fully. A small gasp escaped Elise. Nolan sat up straight. My aunt's face went white, not with fear but with disbelief. As though the universe had shifted around her and she wasn't prepared for the sensation. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do. The silence was so complete it felt like standing at the center of a storm. I'm done being the charity case, I said softly. And I'm done being your lesson. Your story. Your burden. Your warning. I'm not here to maintain the image of a family that never protected me. My aunt inhaled slowly, deeply, like someone bracing for impact. But I wasn't finished. I'm building something, I said. Something real. Something that helps people. And I won't let you turn it into another performance. I stood. This meeting is over. As I walked toward the door, I felt their eyes on me, 3 pairs, stunned, shaken, afraid in a way they didn't know how to articulate. And I realized something. They weren't just afraid of my independence or my success, they were afraid because, for the first time, they couldn't define me, and for the first time, they couldn't control me. But as I reached the estate's front steps, my phone buzzed, and the message on the screen turned the air cold around me. We need to talk. It's about your mother. Everything inside me stilled. The past wasn't done with me yet. The message came from a number I didn't recognize. No name. No context. Just those 6 words that cut through my chest like a thin, cold blade. We need to talk. It's about your mother. For a moment, I stood frozen on the estate's stone steps, the winter air settling on my skin like frost. My mother. The one person who had stood beside me quietly through all the years of being underestimated, dismissed, pitted. She never pushed. Never demanded. She simply believed in me in the soft, steady way of someone who had learned that love didn't have to be loud to be strong. So why would anyone need to talk to me about her? And why like this, cryptic, urgent, anonymous? I didn't go home. Instead, I walked to my car, shut the door, and dialed the number immediately. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, breathless, nervous, like she'd been pacing. Mara? Yes, I said, gripping the steering wheel. Who is this? A pause filled the line, shaky and fragile. My name is Cheryl. I used to work with your mother. Years ago. I tried to place the name. Couldn't. What's going on? I asked, more sharply than intended. Your mother? She used to volunteer at the women's shelter on Donovan Street, right? Another pause. She stopped coming a few days ago. No call. No explanation. She's never done that. Not once. My heart tightened. My mother never missed shifts. She considered commitment a form of respect. I went by her house, Cheryl continued, and her car was there but she wasn't answering the door. I didn't want to overstep. But something feels wrong. Wrong, the word seemed to echo inside me like a slow-moving tremor. Have you called the police? I asked. No, she whispered. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I should. I thought maybe you'd know where she is. I started the car. I didn't remember turning the key. I didn't remember pulling out of the estate driveway. I only remember the sudden, consuming need to get home. To see her. To hear her voice. To know she was fine. My mother didn't vanish. She didn't ignore calls. She didn't disappear from commitments, but as I drove, something unsettling surfaced, something I hadn't let myself examine since the unveiling. She had been quiet lately. Tired. Distracted. Her smile didn't reach her eyes during our last dinner. When I told her about the upcoming ceremony, she'd hugged me tightly, too tightly, and whispered, I'm proud of you. Baby, in a tone that carried both joy and something that sounded like goodbye. I pulled onto her street, heart pounding. Her car sat in the driveway. Her porch light was on. The curtains were drawn. Everything looked normal. Completely, painfully normal. I rushed to the door, knocked hard. Mom? I called. Mom, it's me. Open the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Mom? Still nothing. I reached under the flower pot for the spare key. I had this sinking feeling, like a quiet dread curling around my ribs, that I wasn't prepared for what I might find inside. The house was silent when I entered. Lights off. Air still. I flicked the switch in the hallway. Warm light washed over the familiar entryway with the framed photos of my childhood taped crookedly to the wall. Mom? I called again, stepping deeper inside. My voice bounced back to me, hollow. Her bedroom door was closed. I pushed it open slowly. The room was neat. Bed made. Curtains open enough for a sliver of daylight to cut across the carpet. But her phone sat charging on the nightstand, a red flag. She never left home without it. And on her dresser, next to the jewelry tray, was a sealed envelope with my name written in her handwriting. My stomach dropped, hands trembling. I picked it up, slid a thumb under the flap, and unfolded the letter inside. My Mara, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want my shadow to fall over your light. You deserve every good thing coming your way, and I hoped I'd be strong enough to stay beside you through all of it. But things don't always unfold the way we hope. I've been sick. I kept it to myself. Maybe I shouldn't have. I just didn't want you to carry me the way I carried the world when you were little. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything, because you already gave me everything, more than I deserved, more than I ever expected. By the time you read this, I'll be at St. Helena's. I didn't want an ambulance, and I didn't want a dramatic exit. I'm not dying, Mara. At least, I hope not. But I needed help. Quietly. Without causing waves. Without making you panic during the biggest moment of your life. Come when you can. I love you. Momi sank onto the edge of her bed, the letter trembling in my hands. Sick. Quietly sick. My mother, the woman who held her pain like it was something fragile, something undeserving of attention, had been carrying this alone. And while I was preparing for the unveiling, preparing for the fallout, she was preparing for something far heavier. Within minutes, I was back in the car, driving to St. Helena's Hospital with a speed I didn't know I was capable of. The sky felt darker than it should have at that hour, like the world was dimming itself out of respect. I think I held my breath every block, because when I finally burst through the hospital doors, my lungs burned. The receptionist looked up. Can I help you? My mother, I said, voice shaking. Carmen Delaney. She was brought in today. The receptionist nodded and typed rapidly. Room 414. Take the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway outside her room smelled like antiseptic and quiet grief. My hands couldn't stop trembling as I pushed the door open. She was there. Pale. Hooked up to monitors. Breathing evenly but exhausted. A nurse adjusted the 4-line and glanced at me gently. She was dehydrated and struggling to breathe. She came in on her own. Smart woman. Can I began, but my voice cracked. Of course, the nurse said and stepped aside. I walked to the bed. My mother opened her eyes slowly, like lifting them required strength she didn't have. When she saw me, a tired smile tugged at her lips. Hey, baby. I sat beside her and took her hand. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. She squeezed my fingers weakly. Because you've carried yourself for so long. I didn't want you carrying me too. You're my mother, I said, tears stinging my eyes. You don't get to go through this alone. I didn't go through it alone, she said softly. I had your voice in my head. The way you push forward. The way you rise quietly. You taught me more courage than you think. For a moment, I just breathed, slowly, deeply, letting myself be still beside her. Letting myself feel the fear. Letting myself feel the truth, all the years of being underestimated by the family, all the years of being dismissed. All the years of being treated like the charity case, none of it hurt as much as the idea of losing her. A doctor came in, reviewed her chart. Explained the diagnosis gently, severe pneumonia. Treatable. Serious, but treatable. She would need monitoring, rest, medication, time. Relief washed through me so hard my body sagged forward. She came in just in time, the doctor added, just in time. When the doctor left, my mother studied my face with eyes that looked older than I remembered. Mara, she whispered, I heard something today. About you. At the center. I froze. How? Nurses talk, she said with a tiny smile. Apparently someone donated something huge. And apparently her family didn't see it coming. Mom, and apparently her name is everywhere. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. Tears spilled before I could stop them. For the next hour, we talked. Softly. Slowly. She told me she'd been feeling unwell for weeks. Told me she didn't want to overshadow my moment. Told me she didn't want my family using her illness as ammunition. They don't get access to my life anymore, I said firmly. Or yours. She nodded, tired but relieved. Later, when she drifted to sleep, I stepped out to the hallway to breathe, and that's when I saw it. Elise standing at the end of the corridor, dressed in a fitted beige coat, expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then she walked toward me slowly, heels echoing down the tile floor. When she stopped in front of me, she looked at the door behind me, the door to my mother's room, and something flickered in her eyes. Not empathy, curiosity. You should have told us she was sick, she said. I stared at her. Calm. Silent. Steady, she continued. It affects everything, Mara. The timing. The publicity. The narrative. People will talk. Stop, I said softly. She blinked, startled. You don't get to speak about her, I said, voice steady as stone. You don't get to frame this. You don't get to twist it into something that serves the family. Elise swallowed. I'm just saying we could have used. You don't get to use anything, I said, leaning closer. Not my donation. Not my name. Not my mother's illness. Not anymore. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't just about jealousy or pride. My quiet rise threatened the entire system they built their identity on, but I wasn't done, not with them, not with the truth, because what Elise said next, softly, almost like she didn't mean for it to slip, changed the battlefield entirely. There's something you don't know about your mother. And my world tilted again. I didn't sleep the night before the unveiling. Not because I was nervous, but because I felt strangely calm. A kind of quiet clarity had settled over me, the way snow covers a lawn and suddenly every sharp edge disappears. I kept replaying the months of whispers, the digs at my clothes, the pitying smiles my cousins gave each time I declined something expensive or refused to join their vacations. I remembered every comment at every dinner table. Alia doesn't have the lifestyle for this restaurant. Let her sit. She's not used to real food. Poor thing, always counting pennies. Just be grateful we're including you. Every moment had layered itself inside my chest like sediment. And tomorrow, for the first time in years, The ground beneath them would finally shift. I arrived early at the new community center, my community center, before any of the guests. Before the mayor's team finished setting up the podium. Before the press arranged their microphones. The morning was cool, light drifting softly across the parking lot. The building stood tall and warm-toned, wrapped in brick and glass, like hope made real. It still amazed me how different it felt in here when the halls weren't filled with construction noise. I walked down the main corridor, past the gym, the art room, the reading garden, the multipurpose hall with the skylight that made every surface glow. Every wall carried some version of who I used to be, the girl who needed spaces like this because she had nowhere else to go. This building wasn't charity. It was closure. Around 9. I stood at the entrance as the crowd began to gather. The first to arrive, of course, were my cousins. They came in groups, draped in designer coats and sunglasses. Even though we were inside the lobby, Soraya saw me first. Her brows pinched together like she'd tasted something sour. "You're here early," she said, her voice floating with false sweetness. "Are you volunteering today? Or helping arrange chairs or something?" I smiled. Not a sarcastic smile. Not a bitter one. Just. "Still, no," I said. "I have a role in the program." She blinked. "A role? Like what? Giving a little thank you speech on behalf of the... I don't know. Other community members?" My other cousins stifled small laughs behind perfectly manicured hands. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Behind us, the mayor's assistant walked over, tablet in hand. "Miss Alia," she said warmly. "We're almost ready. You'll be speaking second, right after the mayor." My cousins froze. 2 seconds passed. Then 3. Then Soraya's voice thinned to a whisper. "Speaking? Second?" "Yes," the assistant replied. "It's a short program. The mayor will introduce the donor, and then Miss Alia will give her remarks. Please be seated near the front." My cousins stared at me like the ground had tilted. But still, no one understood. Not fully. The real hit was still coming, and I was patient. They drifted away slowly, each glance back at me sharper than the last. For the first time, I didn't lower my eyes. I didn't shrink. I didn't explain myself before they judged me. I simply stood there as I was, calm, centered, and untouchable. When the event began, the main hall filled faster than I'd expected. Families, teachers, volunteers, small business owners, so many faces I recognized, so many that had once helped shape who I became. The mayor took her place at the podium as murmurs softened into a quiet ripple. "Today," she began, "we unveil a building that represents generosity, compassion, and a belief in second chances. This center will change thousands of lives. And the donor who made this possible requested anonymity, until today." My cousins leaned forward in their seats. Somewhere in the room, I heard a camera shutter click. The mayor continued. "Before we reveal the plaque, I want to acknowledge her spirit. She once benefited from spaces like these, and now she ensures others will have the same opportunities. Her gift was not about legacy, but about dignity." My chest tightened. The earlier calm deepened into something deeper, a grounding. "And now," the mayor said, turning toward the cloth-covered plaque at the front of the hall, "it is my honor to invite our donor to join me." She didn't say my name yet. She didn't have to, because the audience began to turn, row by row, like a slow wave. People stepped aside. My cousins' heads whipped toward me so fast I almost heard the air move. "Alia?" whispered Soraya, her face draining of color. I rose. Not theatrically. Not slowly. Just naturally, the way someone stands when it's finally time. Every step to the front felt like I was walking out of every version of myself they had forced me into. The girl who was frugal. The cousin who was less fortunate. The charity case they subtly pitted. The silent one at the end of the table. That girl had been an illusion, and illusions end. At the podium, the mayor squeezed my shoulder and gestured toward the plaque. "Whenever you're ready." I wrapped my hand around the edge of the cloth. My heartbeat didn't race. It steadied, then I pulled it down. Gasps scattered through the hall. The plaque wasn't small. It wasn't tasteful or subtle. It was bold, carved in brushed metal, large enough to be legible from the last row. The Alia Hassani Community Center. Made possible by the generous donation of ALYAHASSANI. The silence that followed wasn't quiet, it was thick. Heavy. Electric, like a truth finally spoken. My cousins looked like they'd been slapped. One of them, I think Rania, pressed her hand to her mouth. Another blinked so fast her mascara smudged. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't look away from their shock. I turned back to the podium. Thank you, I said, my voice steady as stone. This center means a lot to me. There was a time when I needed a place just like this. A place where I wasn't judged for having less. A place where I wasn't made to feel small. A place where I could grow. Several people nodded. A few clapped softly, but most importantly, I continued, I wanted to give back without expecting applause or status. Sometimes the loudest people in our lives think they know our worth because they compare it to money or lifestyle. But real worth, real dignity, comes from what we build quietly. The crowd murmured an agreement. My cousins froze like statues. I've learned, I said, that generosity doesn't need to be decorated. It just needs to be real. And no one, absolutely no one, gets to decide who is a charity case. I let my eyes settle on them for the first time, all of them, and today, I said, I'm proud to say that everything I've done, I did by standing on my own feet. The applause rose slowly, then built into something warm and genuine. It washed over me, but I didn't let it sweep me away. I stayed grounded, rooted. This wasn't revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. This was the kind that felt like reclaiming a room I'd always been locked out of. After the ceremony ended, people came up to thank me, shake my hand, take photos. My cousins stayed seated, clinging to each other, unsure whether to approach or flee. Eventually, Soraya stood and walked up to me. Her voice was thin and shaky. You donated all of this? Yes. You could have told us. I know. Why didn't you? I met her eyes, and for once, she didn't look down on me, she looked up. As if realizing she'd been standing on a pedestal built from assumptions, because, I said softly, you didn't listen when I spoke. You only listened when you thought I was beneath you. She flinched. I wasn't trying to be, you were, I said gently. But it's done. She swallowed. So what now? Now. Now is the real turning point. Now, I said, we start being honest with each other. If you want a relationship with me, it won't be through pity or superiority. It'll be equal. Or not at all. She blinked rapidly, tears gathering. We didn't know you were capable of something like this. I was always capable, I replied. You just weren't looking. Her face crumpled, but not out of anger, out of realization. Out of losing the version of the world where she was at the top and I stayed small enough to fit her story. We'll do better, she whispered. I didn't promise forgiveness. I didn't embrace her. I didn't say everything was suddenly healed. I simply nodded once, because growth takes time, because truths take longer, because I wasn't the charity case. I was the foundation, and they finally knew it. After the unveiling, the crowd slowly thinned out and the bright, buzzing energy of the morning softened into something quieter, almost tender. I stayed behind as the mayor's staff packed up their equipment and the volunteers began clearing the chairs. The building felt different now, not because the plaque was exposed. Not because people had clapped, but because something inside me had finally unclenched. For years, I had swallowed things, comments, expectations, invisible hierarchies. The kind of subtle cruelty that hides behind polite smiles and just joking tones. I used to think that endurance was strength, but standing there, in the center of the hall I had helped build, I realized something else. Strength wasn't silence. Strength was truth. As I walked through the newly finished rooms, I trailed a hand along the painted walls. The gym smelled faintly of varnish. The art studio still had unopened boxes of brushes and canvases. The reading garden shimmered with natural light. The glass panels catching the sun just right, scattering it in golden squares across the floor. Here, in this space, kids who felt like I once did would find grounding. Parents who needed help would find resources. Teenagers who needed a place to breathe would find safety. A part of me hadn't fully understood how much this place mattered until now, and suddenly I felt the weight of everything I'd carried. Alone, not regret, just the recognition that quiet people often walk the longest roads without applause. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle into my bones. By late afternoon, the building was nearly empty. I stepped outside into the crisp air just in time to see my cousins approaching me again, though this time their stride had changed. No confidence. No arrogance, just uncertainty. Soraya walked slightly ahead of the others, her hands clasped together as if she didn't know what to do with them. Alia, can we talk? I nodded and waited. She took a shaky breath. I want to say I'm sorry. We all made assumptions about your life. We thought you were struggling. We thought you needed help. You treated me like a project, I said gently. She winced, nodding. Yes. And that wasn't fair. But you should have told us you were doing so well. You should have said something. I tried, I replied. Not about the donation, that wasn't meant to be announced. But about my life. You didn't ask. You didn't want to know. You preferred the version of me that made you feel generous. Her throat worked. Her eyes glistened. You're right, she whispered. We saw ourselves as the successful ones. And we assumed you were? Less. I know. She looked down, ashamed. But you weren't less. You never were. We just didn't bother looking deeper. A long moment passed between us, the kind that pulled old memories out of the shadows. My first job. The side gigs. The extra shifts. The nights I spent studying while they vacationed. All the times they belittled my choices, thinking they knew what I could afford or what I lacked, and all the times I let them. Soraya wiped her cheek. We want to make things right. But we don't know where to begin. Begin with honesty, I said. And respect. No more jokes about money. No more pity. No more calling me humble as if that's a polite synonym for struggling. She nodded. We can do that. And understand, I added, that it will take time. Healing always does. Behind her, my other cousins nodded too. For once, none of them spoke over each other. None of them tried to gloss over the moment or defend themselves. Their silence wasn't empty, it was acknowledgement growth had begun, and growth, I'd learned, is never loud. After they left, I walked slowly to my car, but I didn't get in right away. Instead, I leaned against the door and watched the center as the sun began to lower behind it, painting the windows orange. A warm breeze drifted past, carrying the faint scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I was suddenly 10 again, sitting alone on the cold floor of the old community center miles away. The one that had offered me free snacks because we couldn't always afford them. The one place where no one asked about my clothes or my mother's overtime shifts or why I read books faster than I could borrow them. I saw myself curled up in the corner of the reading room listening to the faint hum of the heater. Back then, I didn't understand that I wasn't inferior, just different. I didn't know I would someday grow into the woman who built what she once needed. I opened my eyes again and let the full circle weight of that realization settle over me. I wasn't the charity case. I was the benefactor. I was the one who made something real, and the irony wasn't bitter. It was beautiful. That evening, I returned home to find my phone overflowing with messages. Some were from distant relatives, stunned and proud. Some from old teachers who had seen the news coverage. Some from childhood friends who typed messages like, I always knew you'd change the world somehow. But one message stood out, from my mother. It said only 5 words, I always knew. My girl. And with that, everything inside me softened. I set my phone aside and sat on the edge of my bed, letting the day wash over me one last time. The flashing cameras, the applause, my cousins' faces, the plaque gleaming under the lights, all of it felt like pieces of a story that had finally found its ending point. 2 weeks later, I returned to the community center for the first official youth program. The building felt different now, lived in, humming with movement. Children laughing. Parents talking. A teenager sketching quietly in the art room. People filling spaces that had once been only blueprints and ideas. A little girl tugged at my sleeve. Are you the lady whose name is on the shiny wall? I smiled. Yes. She grinned wide, missing a front tooth. Thank you for the reading garden. It feels like magic. Her joy felt like the purest gift, and in that moment, I realized something important. My donation wasn't revenge. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't proof that I was better now. It was a reclaiming. A rewriting of the story they had given me. A restoration of my own voice. As I stood there watching the children run through the hall, my heart felt calm in a way it hadn't in years. This building wasn't built from spite, it was built from survival. From gratitude. From the long, quiet resilience that grows in people who were underestimated. For too long. I was not the charity case. I was not the quiet girl at the table. I was the woman who built a space large enough for all of us to grow, and with that realization, I finally felt free, truly free, not from them, but from the version of myself I'd once been forced to carry. I walked outside into the warm evening, looked at the gleaming plaque one more time, and smiled. My name wasn't on that medal because I needed validation. It was there because I had earned it, because I had risen without noise, because I had learned the truth. Sometimes the people who think you need saving are the ones who can't see how high you've already climbed, and sometimes the quietest life builds the brightest legacy. I turned away from the building, the golden light brushing my shoulders, and walked forward with steady steps, not small ones, not timid ones, steps that finally felt like mine.